So you started your podcast and quickly found out that you're not getting many listeners. I know that if you do not fix this step, you're going to have a very difficult time growing your podcast. What if I told you the majority of podcasters are losing out on this step and the potential of thousands, even millions of listeners and followers? In this episode, I'm going to give you a tip that's going to help you reach your ideal listeners, build your show, and grow your influence with your podcast. We are going to be talking about what? This episode is about podcast SEO. What is podcast SEO? Where SEO stands for search engine optimization. If you've been online, you know that search engine optimization, SEO, is very prominent on YouTube, online, when it comes to ranking in Google, what have you. But there is podcast SEO, and we're going to learn what you need to do to get your podcast found. So the first thing is you need to utilize, I'm going to give you 3 tips. The first of which is you need to utilize Google Trends. Now, Google Trends is very important because it allows you to find out what people are already searching for. If you can add value right off the bat and people are already searching for something, then you could pick up on some of that potential traffic. So I'm going to give you a demonstration here and let you kind of understand what you can expect when using Google Trends. So I'm going to go to Google Trends right here, and I'm just going to show you what this looks like. So if you go here, Google Trends, right here, if you're listening on the audio, you could go to Spotify and you could watch this episode so you can get further context. So I'm at the search bar here, and let's just say, for instance, you have a podcast and you talk about Marvel. You talk about Marvel anything. So why don't we search in Marvel? Okay. So if you go here, you could see the search traffic over time for the topic of Marvel, but this is where it gets interesting. You could go to related topics here and related queries, and related topics is what you want to search for. So if you see here, these are the 5 keywords that people have been searching for the most prominently recent. Black Knight, Dane Whitman, Marvel Future Revolution, Echo Marvel Comics, Morbius, because there was a Morbius movie came out, and you can kind of see the trajectory of what's been going on with these searches. And if I click one of these, you can kind of see where there's a spike in certain things. So what you can do is you can utilize this tool, and say you have a podcast about Marvel, you can use this Google Trend tool to create an episode about Black Knight. All right, or whatever that means. Okay. And this tool can be used to prospect what you're going to be talking about in your podcast, and you can use it for a variety of different things. Also, let's say you have a news podcast. You can look up what's recently trending here in Google Trends, and you can tailor your episode around relevant events. Why is this important when it comes to podcasting and when it comes to podcast SEO? This is important because there is potential listeners right there that are already searching for something. So if you can talk about that topic, put it in your episode, you already have listeners right there who are already searching for that. Okay. Now you need to make sure that it is congruent with your podcast as is. For instance, like if you have a cooking podcast, it probably wouldn't be in your best interest to talk about politics. But if there is something that coincides, maybe if there is, for instance, a type of movie that came out, and in the movie they were eating Italian food, maybe what you could do is if you're a cooking channel or if you're a podcast talks about food, you could maybe create some recipes that you saw in the show and kind of put your spin on it, or put your spin on something that is relevant. You got to be creative with this, but that is a tool you could use. Use Google Trends to find out what's relevant and then tailor it to your show. All right. The second thing that I wanted to bring up, that's the first tip. use Google Trends. Second tip, okay, is you need to use keywords that you find in Google Trends in your title and in your show notes. So podcast hosting platforms are what you put the audio in, what distributes your podcast out. Podcasting directories like Apple, Spotify, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, they house all of the podcasts and then they categorize them and then people can consume them there. So for your podcast to be found, you need to make sure that it can be categorized and indexed properly by these podcasting directories. The best way to do that, simply make sure that the title is relevant to what you're talking about. If your podcast episode is about dating and relationships and infidelity, make sure that it has that in the topic, in the title, in the show notes. And if your podcast is mostly about relationships, it might help you to have in the podcast name dating, relationships, etc., etc. So when people are searching for that, it pops up. And you can use this for a variety of things. An example I had was if you're going to be somebody that talks about food, if you're going to be somebody that talks about food and cooking, it would behoove you to have cooking in your title. Example, cooking with Kevin. All right. Foodie Adventures with Anna. That's the podcast name. And then in the topic of the episode, you would put in specifically what you're talking about. And I also want to elaborate with that when it comes to your show notes. You need to make sure that in your show notes, you're at least putting one paragraph that explains exactly what your podcast episode is about. And I'm going to kind of give you a demonstration here of what you can do when it comes to making sure that you're doing this properly in your podcast host. So right here, we're going to my podcast host, Anchor. I have a test message here that I set up, and I'm going to go to save changes, and then I'm just going to give you an idea of what you can expect. So an example of this is just going to be, let's say, for instance, we have a podcast episode where we want to talk about the Marvel movie. We want to talk about the Marvel series, Moon Knight. And this podcast episode is about the Marvel show, Moon Knight. It's about a reaction to episode 4. So what I'll put in is, for the title of that, I'll put Marvel Moon Knight episode 4 reaction. And then here in the description, I'll give you just a live test of what the description should probably look like for this. So you want to say what it's about. So why don't we do this? Why don't we say, in this podcast episode about Marvel, we will discuss Marvel's Moon Knight episode 4. This will be a spoiler written podcast episode. So if you haven't watched, then you should watch the episode first. In this episode, you can expect to get some commentary and perspective on Marvel Moon Knight from a group of Marvel fans, and we will keep it light and fun. That's just an example of what you could put in the paragraph that kind of just describes what you can expect in the episode. I just did this on the fly, but this will help to index the podcast episode for the directories. All right. One thing you got to realize what I did in there, I put Marvel Moon Knight in there at least 3 times. It's in the episode title. It's in the description twice. I also put Marvel in there a couple other times. You want to make sure that you're loading your show notes with keywords in a fashion where it still flows and you're not just jamming them in there, but it'll help the directory to properly index what the episode is about. So that's like an example of the way you need to be thinking when you're putting together your podcast episodes. I hope that makes sense. That is the second thing that I wanted to cover. The third thing, which I think is the most important, all right, you need to create a website or a blog. Why? You need to create a website or a blog because it gives your podcast episode a place to rest online where it can be searched. Do not leave your podcast being searched only through directories. That puts all of the work, that puts all of the potential for you to be found up to algorithms, up to the directory. And if you know anything about Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, not really Twitter, but if you know anything about a lot of these social media platforms, the algorithms are not ideal. They put it in front of people based on different criteria, and you don't want to be subject to that when it comes to your podcast. You want to have control of how your podcast gets searched for, right? So the best way to do that is you need to create a website or a blog. You could do that using a lot of different things. I use Anchor to host my podcast, and when I publish an episode, it automatically gives me the option to convert it to a blog post. You should be doing that. It converts it to a blog post. It adds the audio. It adds the title, the show notes that I already put in there, a very simple page. You also can use other hosting platforms such as Buzzsprout. I know that a part of their plan, they set up a website for you, and every episode that you publish, you get a blog post. That is very helpful because it allows those keywords, those other things that we talked about in this episode, it allows those things to be found in Google, and it helps it to rank even better because it has more context, more information for Google to find, as well as for your listeners. It helps your listeners to have a place to go and actually see what you are talking about. You could link sources. You could link stuff that you talked about in the episode. You could add pictures, add social media links, add affiliate links. That's a whole nother thing where you could start to monetize your podcast without even having sponsorships. There are a lot of tools that you could use to really bolster your show and your influence so you could reach your ideal listener. Also, there are some other things that you need to think about too when it comes to creating a website or a blog. When it comes to creating a website or a blog, it also allows you to do a very important thing that people overlook. You could add a transcript to your episodes so you can make it more accessible that way for people who maybe cannot, if somebody's deaf or hearing impaired, they might not be able to listen to your podcast. But if you provide a transcript, the person could still be included in your show and listen or read along. And there are services that you could use to do this. You could go through and just transcribe out your episode, but that's time consuming. I use a service called Otter.ai, which has been great. They have a subscription plan that's about $9.99 per month. What you can do with Otter.ai is awesome. I'm going to show you guys what that looks like as well. And on Otter.ai, you could do something very cool where you could take the audio file, you could take a video file, and I'll just kind of show you what this looks like. Go here. You can import the audio or video file that you want to go to. I'll kind of give you an idea of what you can expect this to be. So right now, live, I uploaded that video file, right? This is just the test podcast thing that I did. And boom, we have a transcript of it already. Now, it takes longer for longer files, but we go to it. Oh, and it's processing the conversation. We'll give it a moment. And what happens is, boom, there we go. And this is the test recording for the podcast episode. It already did it as a transcript here. I'll kind of give you guys an idea of what the test message sounds like. It's me here. And let me just play this real quick. This is a test recording for the podcast SEO. That's what it sounds like. Video. In this so you can episode, follow along, change anything. And then you can go here, export, boom. And you can export that file, and then you can go and attach it to the blog post you create, or you could put it even in, if you have a YouTube channel and you also put your podcast up on YouTube like I do, you could add the file there. So then you can make it more accessible on YouTube to where it could show up in search. There is a lot of powerful tools that you can use with a service like Otter AI, and that helps to boost your podcast SEO. So we have kind of as a wrap up, we have 3 things. Google Trends, use that to find topics to talk about, to find relevant topics, and to do your keyword research. Secondly, make sure that you're using keywords in your title, in your show notes, and also in your podcast name, if applicable. It's important to have something that's relevant to what you're talking about if you can. Also, you need to create a website or a blog to add further context to what you're doing so Google can rank what you're talking about. And then you also can reach those potential viewers because you have further context. You have somewhere to house your podcast transcript. And this all helps for you to have ownership of your podcast, to have ownership of when somebody listens, where they listen. And I kind of want to give you an idea of what I'm talking about because I'm going to go to my website, which you could visit if you haven't done so already, karatjuicepodcast.com. And here we have the landing page of karatjuicepodcast.com. And you could go here and you could see what I'm doing when it comes to context for podcasts. I did this podcast recently talking about the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. I have tags here, which are keywords that I researched. All right. We have the thumbnail. We have a summary of the podcast here. And the first I have in this podcast episode about culture, we are discussing Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, defamation, and sexual assault allegations. Boom. That's a concise paragraph, kind of giving you an idea of what you can expect. We're linked to the YouTube. We're linked to Spotify. I also have sources, social media links, affiliate links, all right, related post. And here at the end, I have a podcast transcript here that has a full transcript that I did using Otter.ai. And this is all being hosted by WordPress, and I own this website. Now, it takes some time to develop all of this, but this is important because it allows my podcast to be searched for. All right. And I'm also going to give you guys some extra sauce. If you're still here listening, I appreciate you being here and listening. And I want to show you this here. I also added in, make sure that on your podcast website, you're adding in something like this, a podcast player, because this allows people to, some people don't even know what podcasts are yet. Some people don't have a podcast app. Some people don't even have mobile phones. Some people are just online. This allows people to listen to my podcast, follow along, or go and check it out on different services through this podcast player. Now, this podcast player is courtesy of Fusebox. However, you could add different podcast players. I think I pay a subscription for this. I think I might pay like $12 a month or something like that. And it has a lot of tools that you can customize the color of this. You can share it out. So I like the layout of this, but you could use a free podcast player. I think Spotify has podcast players. And what I do when I use Spotify For instance, I just embed this link here in my website and somebody could go click and they could start watching my
podcast episode.
Right in
we
line
are discussing
here. All right.
Johnny Depp,
I don't know if it's showing up there,
defamation,
right
domestic
in line
violence,
in
the Me
this
Too
podcast
movement,
player,
and
they can
false
start watching my
accusations.
episode.
That's
So
a lot to.
That is how I do my podcast website to make sure that I'm doing the best job that I can and get my podcast found in search. And I think this is the stuff that people need to start thinking about and doing on the back end to get more listeners, to get your message out there. I am ecstatic about podcasting. I've been trying to find my way with this whole content creation thing, and I am resting on and I am becoming more focused on the things that I want to do. And I've come to the realization that I am a content creator, but at my heart, I am a podcaster who is on various platforms. And I want more people to start sharing their stories, sharing their messages, not being discouraged by only getting a couple listens at the beginning, because podcasting is not easy. It is not for everyone. It takes somebody really not being able to. If you're somebody that needs instant gratification, I'm just going to be honest with you. Podcasting is not for you. Podcasting takes patience. It takes doing something and not getting any feedback from it from the beginning. But I promise you, if you just take your time, take a beat, reach out to other podcasters. What I've learned is other people who are in this space and who are podcasting want to share the information. I know me, I want to help people. I want people to share their stories because I love podcasts. I want to hear what you have to say. If you want to know what my setup is like and what I'm doing here, I have a podcast episode video that is on this channel that will talk about that, how to start a podcast. If you want to know the type of camera I'm using, it's a Panasonic Lumix S5. Link to that is in the description. I have affiliate links down there if you want to pick that up. I also have a Zoom PodTrack P8, which I'm recording out of, and I'm still rocking the second mic I ever got, my Shure MV7, and I'm comfortable with this setup. I don't think I need to get anything else. I think a lot of people don't let you know, like, when you're just starting out, you could go with just like a $50 mic, like a Samsung Q2U, a Zoom ZDM1. You can get a simple little recorder, or you could just record off of your phone if you're going to be doing a video podcast. The most important thing is you don't get overwhelmed and bogged down by this. This is a lot of stuff that I've learned after some time doing this podcasting, and I want you to not make the same mistakes I made. I didn't start backloading and putting all of this SEO, transcripts, all this stuff into my content until almost like a year in. So you learn this stuff over time, but I promise you, me implementing this type of stuff, I'm getting almost 10 times the amount of views I was getting just starting out. All right. When I first started out, I was getting like 2 or 3 listens. I was getting maybe 10 listens an episode. And per week, I was getting like maybe 20. Per month, I was getting like maybe 80. Now I'm at the threshold now where it's progressing. And last month, I got over 750 downloads in a month. And that continues to go up because the month prior to that, I think I got like around 400. So the progression keeps going. Don't quit at the beginning. And I've been podcasting for over a year and a half, but I'm starting to see results from some of the stuff that I started doing just a couple of months ago with my website, with adding in a podcast player, using podcast SEO. That's when my downloads and my listens started to go up. So I hope this is helpful for you. I'll recap one more time. The 3 steps: Google Trends. Make sure you're doing Google keyword research to make sure you're finding relevant topics to talk about in your podcast. Secondly, We need to be utilizing titles. We need to be utilizing show notes. And also your podcast name is important to make sure that it is relevant and pertinent when it comes to search, being search friendly. And thirdly, create a website or a blog to make sure that your podcast is a place that you own. You own that real estate when it comes to the website. And also you can add further context to your shows. You also can interact with your audience on there on a platform that you own. So make sure that you're looking at that. I recommend WordPress, but you could use Squarespace. You could use Wix. You could use Podpage, or you can use a hosting platform like Buzzsprout, among others. I think Podbean as well, where they do that service for you on the back end. So do some research on it. Use what you want. I use Anchor. It's free. I've enjoyed Anchor. And I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you did and you got value out of it, do me a favor, and you should be doing this on your podcast. Please give me a rating and a review, as it really helps out. 5-star, 5-star, 5-star. I want you to tell your story, and I want you to get it out there. If you're a podcaster and you're listening to this episode, or you're on YouTube or wherever you are, either put it in the rating and review. I want to know what's the name of your podcast and how long you've been podcasting. And also on YouTube, go ahead and drop the name of your podcast in the description. Let's see if we can find out what you're doing with your podcast. I would love to listen to it. And until next time, I'm going to leave it at that. I'll see you guys. Peace.